Afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Biblio Fitness. Hope everyone has had a great start to their weekend. It is a beautiful day out here, not gonna lie. Well, I think I'm gonna appreciate also the fact that I have weekends off now and I don't feel utterly exhausted throughout the course of the day because I had legs or something. So I think I'm gonna like it quite a bit, and it probably means that I'm gonna be able to throw on a little bit more volume, throw like a set or two somewhere. But as the lifts go and as the weeks go, then I'll be able to make those adjustments. So I have to see how everything is first. But aside from that, to continue on, like I said before, I'm gonna skip certain shit. And honestly, I forgot to take notes while I was reading. Well, no, not really. Like I remember, when the people came in to grab Dmitri. Dmitri at first thinks that it's about Grigory. At first they think that he's like because they arrested him for murder committed that evening, and at first he thinks it's Grigory. The blood and the guilt that he has felt throughout the course of the night, which has led him to want to commit suicide and all these things, is the blood spilled over Grigory, with Grigory. I mean, like, he killed Grigory. But then they immediately tell him, like, oh, they found Fyodor Pavlovich with his head caved in, his head bashed in his room, and he's dead. And he literally becomes dumbstruck, like they hit him with it. Like, he clearly, I've been spoiled because I read the book before, but you can tell when you read the story that Dmitri, there's no way that this guy did it. Because when they tell him that, he's also like, oh, you guys, I'm not guilty, and I'll tell you the truth because I know I'm not guilty, and I know what I say, that I will vindicate myself because I have nothing to hide. Like, I thought it was Grigory, and he's like, oh, I know I'm gonna have to pay for that. You don't just bash an old man on the head and get away with it scot clean. I know I'm gonna have to pay for that, but and then he goes on to say, oh, God really did answer my prayers. I was really hoping that he was gonna save a damner such as I. And he did. And he wants to clear this up as soon as possible so he could get with Grushenska. Grushenska has offered her hand in marriage wants to be the wife of Dmitri, and she wants to give her life to him. And, why don't they work in the fields and things like that. So he just wants to get this over with as soon as possible so he can, live on with Agrafena, or Grushenska, whatever. But it's the thing is that throughout the course of these months, he's really set himself up to fail, right? He's blurted out all over the place that he wants to murder his father. Everyone knows that they have beef. Everyone knows that it's exactly for $3,000 that he had beef with him and that he wanted to kill him. Everyone knew this. So there's a lot of evidence to support the theory that Dmitri was the one that killed Fyodor, because who else could it be at first? They ask him, they tell him, they got obviously the witnesses of Fenya and Pyotr that he was bloodied, and he came in and he had blood on his hands, and he grabbed a brass pedal. And when they asked him about the brass pedal, he's like, oh, I just wanted to grab it, because they pestered him, like, why did you grab such a thing? Like, who just grabs an object like that and runs off? He's like, oh, I was scared of the night. And like, you're scared of walking around at night? Like, you feel like you need to have a weapon? Is that the purpose? And then he goes on to talk about some sort of dream that he has, that he's running away from this figure, and he hides in the closet. He hides in very demeaning ways, embarrassing ways. And it's more embarrassing because he knows that the figure knows where he's hiding, and he's just fucking with him, like, if he doesn't know. And the interrogator, one of the prosecutors, goes on to ask him if, mention that he has quite strange dreams, if that's true. And obviously the first question even also is the money. Where'd you get this money? And at first, Dmitri is extremely reserved. He's obstinate, and like he does not want to divulge that information. He says that there's no point. Like, you guys are not going to believe him. The evidence is damning, and I'm already succumbing to this sort of meanness, being open with you guys, and I'm not going to do that to myself. Like, he's not going to open himself up like that. And they tell him, like, hey, look, you don't have to say anything, but you are really damning yourself if you don't say this. You didn't have any money. They tell him, like, dude, didn't you a few hours ago pawn your pistols for 10 rubles? Where the hell did you get even more money? Like, you were broke. You were saying, like, 2 days ago you didn't have any money. You had to pawn your pistols. You had to pawn your watch. That's 2 instances where you had to sell something in order to have money. How the fuck did you, out of nowhere, have all this money? And at last, at first he doesn't want to, but in the end he ends up like, you know what, I'm about to bullet, I'm gonna say the truth, I'm gonna tell the truth. And he says that he's been walking around with this amulet, like this amulet rag thing in his chest, and that's where he stored money, and he ripped it on, like, remember, like, in the story, the narrator says exactly 10 minutes later, apparently after he left Feñas, he realized what he did. He realized there was no hope, and he might as well take the money. And in that moment, he became a thief and a scoundrel, because then he goes on to talk about the whole, you know, like, the whole fiasco is that this guy spent 3,000 rubles, or all the money that was given to him by Katerina a month before, on his last spree. But it turns out, he says that, no, I only did 1,500. I didn't spend all that money. And the other money that I didn't spend, I kept it with me. I held it. It's like, so, and I got drunk, but I kept it with me. And the big torment of my life this past month has been that. Like, I've never returned the money back to Katerina, because I know that I'm going to end up wanting to use the money to run away with another woman. But he's like, oh, I'm a scoundrel, but not a thief. And there's a difference. But now that I did use the money, I'm a scoundrel and a thief. And now there's no saving me. And this is obviously astounding, provoking news. You know, this goes completely against common knowledge amongst the residents of the town that they live in. You know, everyone knows. He said it to multiple people that he spent 3,000, not 1,500. But he's like, oh, but who counted and who knew? But they're like, bro, but you said it explicitly. You told people that you spent 3,000. How many people think that you said that? He's like, oh, probably like 100, 200 people will probably say that I spent 3,000. And they're like, and you don't see how that might be an issue for you? Like, did you tell anyone? Do you have it with you? And he's like, no, I tore the rag and I threw it in the park square, and I didn't tell anyone. And they're extremely questionable about this. They're like, dude, how do you not tell anyone? That's just bizarre. Like, what cloth did you use? Where did you get the pins and needles? Do you even know how to sew? How did you learn how to sew? These are the sort of questions that they pester him with about the whole money thing. And then with the whole brass thing, they made him recreate how he was standing on the fence, how he bashed him, what foot did he use to drop down, and stuff like that. This is all quite astounding news, the whole money, like, that he never wasted it all, and now he's back here, and he spends the rest of it. Everything is against him, because, and then at the end of the day, the real question is, if it wasn't you, then who did it? Because one thing that really damns him is that when he recounts what happened, what he did when he got to his father's house, he says that the door was closed. No one had, like, the door to, I guess, the door to his house, the door inside the property was closed. And when he got there, when he snuck over the fence and shit. But then when Gregory wakes up, and when the police approach him and he recounts his testimony, he says that it was open when he got there. And that fucks Dmitri over. Dmitri gets hostile. He's like, what the fuck? Like, I didn't do that. He's lying. I wasn't open. Because he even says it, like, whoever opened it killed Fyodor, because it wasn't him that did it. At the end, he didn't do it. He ran away. And he starts talking about, like, during when he starts recounting his story, he starts talking about the codes that Smerdyakov provided him in order to tell Fyodor that Grushenko was here, or there was something that needed to be attended to. They tell him, like, Smerdyakov was the one that told him about that. You know, he was always a coward. He was always afraid that I was going to hurt him, even though I never did anything to him. He was a little bitch, basically. And at first he's like, oh, but it couldn't possibly be him. I mean, like, he doesn't have the constitution necessary to perform such acts. He's a coward. He's a moral coward. Like, he's like, oh, a little boy could beat his ass. That's what I know. But he telling him about the codes, And then he says that it wasn't him. The police asking me all this question. If it wasn't you, then it has to be this guy, right? Like, who else could it be? And he's like, what the like, you know, especially when they tell him about the door, he's like, oh, it has to be him because it wasn't me. I left. I ran away. I didn't do anything to him. So he clearly was Smirnikov who came behind and hit him. Because it's very interesting, because through a story, me being a cynic, there's a moment where Maria, the wife of Grigory, wakes up because she hears a scream. And it was Smirnikov making this epileptic scream or whatever that haunts this woman. Like, she can't bear that sound, and then immediately woke her up in fear. And it was at that time that she notices Grigory is not in bed. And that's where, when she finds this guy crawling on the floor, blood all over his head, and basically he was in and out of consciousness, that's when she finds it, and it was because of the scream of Smirnikov. So in my head, I'm like, dude, did you just, like, you did this on purpose? This is my take. Like, you know, to me, it's pretty obvious that it's Smirnikov. You know, as you read the story, you could kind of tell. It wasn't Dmitri. He could have done it, but I don't, you know, it's obvious that it wasn't him. But everything is being set up against him, because they even say Smirnikov doesn't look good right now. Like, they say he might not even last a week. He's very sick. You're telling me that he did it? This is really fucking him, because then they go on to interrogate the witnesses. And all the witnesses say the same thing. And he spent a lot of money. And then the owner of the tavern in which he was in was like, oh, no, there's no way. You were handing out hundreds of rubles to a bunch of people. There's no way you just spent 1,500. And he starts giving other stories as to how he knows that. And they ask Grushenska. Even Grushenska's like, oh, yeah, he told me he spent 3,000. Everything's really against Dmitri in this whole affair. I don't think he did it. He didn't do it. He got set up. But the evidence is overwhelming. And we're definitely going to get to that, because I skip over certain parts after this, because I want to get to the juicy part. It's becoming increasingly provocative philosophically. He's really honing in on this whole suffering thing. Dostoevsky is really honing in. Dostoevsky is continuously focusing on this whole suffering thing, suffering for others, being guilty for others, and stuff like that. Because it seems like all of them, like, after this whole event transpiring with Dmitri, right, Grushenska suddenly becomes a noble individual. She takes pity, and she becomes very, you know, she gives her heart out and says, oh, I deserve to fit the crime with him. I'm the one that pushed him to do that. I'm the woman that caused these two men to feud, and for no reason, just because of my spite, just because of my hateful and vengefulness. She does it in about face and character, you know. This really changes her, this moment, this thunderbolt, as Dmitri will describe as later. You know, you require these moments of absolute catastrophe to find out who you are, I suppose, to transform. And what are you going to do when all hope is lost? You know what I'm saying? Because all hope was lost for Dmitri. And then he has this dream about him being driven by a carriage. And he goes to this town that was burning. And he sees everyone emaciated, very skinny, dying. There's no food. You know, all the crops are destroyed. All the homes are destroyed. And they're facing the cold. And then he sees a little baby, you know, crying out for his mom to give him milk. But the woman has no milk. There's no food. And the baby's crying, and he's like, oh, but why is this little baby crying? And the peasant describes it as the wee little one. It's because it's hungry. There's no food. The mama can't give it food. And it's probably going to die. And he starts talking about, like, damn, like, you know, this person is suffering somewhere out there, and we have to suffer for others. Everybody suffers, and everybody deserves compassion. Everyone deserves love and forgiveness and stuff like that. I guess that's the message being elaborated on in this part of the story. Because Dmitri comes out of this a changed man. And so does Grushenska. You know, traumatic moments made him find the truth and God, and understanding that all the suffering they go through, that God takes pity on them and God loves them. And there's this universal thing that we all have to be around or chase for. You know, we're all sinful. We all should not sin in judgment. We should all help one another, which is nice and all. You know, I'm still debating on this whole thing. You know, the one truth, one virtue that we're all following, or we all should follow, has caused a lot of issues. You know, then that's the thing, right? That's the fundamental question. How do we approach this life? Do we, or, you know, because we can't live truly altruistic, but being entirely individualistic is the reason why we're living in the era we are now of constant progress, or the illusion of progress, and constant need for innovation, constant need for the newest and latest and greatest and shit. Become a bunch of consumers, and that's what that's led to. Consumerism, materialism. So it's a fine line, right? Figuring out how this all goes. But that's really been honing in by Dmitri. Well, I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next episode, the aftermath, like the day before the trial. You know, he's obviously gets convicted. There's too much evidence against him. They have to take him in. And it goes 2 months before they go back again and you meet these characters and stuff. So, but yeah, that'll be more to talk about in the next one, about the whole suffering and love thing. And Dmitri says some pretty interesting things in relation to that, and how he's found himself, how he's become a new man. You know, because that's the point of existentialism, is what is the purpose of your suffering. And Dostoevsky turns a more religious route, and Nietzsche goes more of a greatness, like use power, take advantage, use your instincts and your, you know, to advance yourself, to be a better person, to be the Ubermensch, to not be tied by religion and go beyond the pale of morality, as he says. That's why after this, I might read The Antichrist and The Twilight of the Gods. The Twilight of the Gods and The Antichrist by Dostoevsky. I mean, not by Nietzsche, or Beyond Good and Evil. But I do want to read Crime and Punishment. That's a great book, and I'm still debating. But yeah, we'll talk about that more later on. Aside from that, I hope you all have a great day. Hope you all get to read, make some gains, or if you're resting, keep eating. Take care of yourself. I got to do some more stretching today, because I think I went a little crazy during the pool session. So gotta stretch. You gotta maintain your limberness, because if not, a tight muscle is a weak muscle, and you're gonna end up screwing yourself. So love y'all, and until next time, peace.